Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I have a little review of Cirque's Over the Rainbow collection along with a couple of jellies. I picked all of these up from Beyond Polish myself. As a reminder, I am an affiliate with them, but I'll share more of that information towards the end of the video. But yeah, this is a pretty long video for a normal swatch and review because I have a ton of comparisons as well as a couple of recreation attempts for the Crellies specifically. As always, timestamps are in the description box down below, so for now, let me just show you the swatches. The first shade in the collection is Bubblegum Skies, and this one is described as a bubblegum pink Crellie. I would say that's pretty accurate. It's that perfect mid-tone sort of pink shade. I think fairly neutral, maybe a little bit warm leaning or with a warm undertone. It's not super cool toned as you'll see later in the comparison portion, and as expected this was one of my favorites because it's just a really cute pretty pink. This did have a nice formula. I found that it self-leveled pretty well, and as expected for a Crellie it has a decent amount of pigmentation but still very squishy looking, where you can still see a hint of visible nail line even after 3 coats, though it is pretty obscured relatively speaking. I feel like it does look really full coverage here in the 3 coats, but then for my full hand swatches I just did 2 coats over a clear base coat, and in direct sunlight you can definitely still see some visible nail line. I think on my pinky I ended up doing the most sheer coats, so you can just get an idea depending on your application how much coverage you could get. Then we have Coral Cloud, which is described as a coral leaning orange Crellie. While I do think that's accurate, I feel like this also does give me strong creamsicle vibes. There's something about the color that just leans in that territory for me, because when I think of a coral, I usually think of something a little bit warmer and deeper, but there still is that undertone present in this polish. Like the last shade, this had another really nice formula that had decent pigmentation and coverage. Basically what you would expect for a Crellie kind of finish that's between a jelly and a cream, or I think I'd honestly kind of call these milky jellies in a way, because you still see a decent amount of nail line, and I think it would only be even more noticeable if you happen to do thinner coats than I do, because for reference I am a bit heavy-handed. All that being said, I still really love this color. I just love a cute orange. Then we have Lemon Drops, which is described as a pastel butter yellow Crellie. This is another one that I absolutely loved. I know it's not going to be for everybody, which is understandable, one because it's just a yellow nail polish, but it's also a sheer yellow. As you can see on the first coat, while it does have pretty decent coverage, it's not the most flattering, I would say, but it does build up to be this really cute pastel yellow in 2 or 3 coats. I thought it looked nice on 2, but if I looked really closely, I feel like I could see some unevenness or some dark spots, so I think a 3rd coat really helps to even it all out and obviously provide a bit more coverage. So again, your level of coverage could depend on how heavy-handed you are, how your application is, or just how long or short your nails are. Okay, so I know I just said that it didn't look too bad in the 2 coats, but seeing it in 2 coats in direct sunlight, it is a bit more sheer than I would like, so when I wear this again, I would definitely do 3 coats. Next up we have Honeydew, which is described as a pastel light green Crellie. And that description is not wrong, but I don't know, there's something about this that's a very specific shade of green, where I think I would call it almost like a minty green color. I was experiencing this weird thing where as I was swatching it and wearing it, it almost started to look a little bit aqua, like there's this sort of blue undertone coming through, but then obviously comparing this next to other greens and blues, like it's very green. Either way, it definitely is a really pretty color, and formula-wise, it's very similar to the other Crellies so far, although I did kind of get some uneven coverage on the first coat, where I had a little bit more of this sheer spot on the right side of my nail, which didn't end up getting covered up even by the third coat. I feel like you can just see that as a dark spot. So you want to make sure to not load up your brush too much, because you might get some pooling and unevenness, which I think is what happened during my live swatch. But on my full hand swatch, I feel like I got pretty even coverage, even though I only did 2 coats. It's just, again, a bit sheer where you can see straight through to my visible nail line, even though these aren't that glassy jelly finish. It's more of like that milky jelly. Then we have Bluebird, which is described as a sky blue Crellie, and if you watched my April picks video, you already know that I featured this one. It is such a cute shade of blue, definitely in the sky blue family, but I feel like there is a sort of softness to this color as well, which hopefully you'll be able to tell more in the comparison portion. But yeah, I unfortunately did struggle during my reapplication of this, like this current live swatch footage. You can see on the second coat, it ended up being a little bit uneven, especially towards the left side of my nail. So that unfortunately was still coming through a bit even on the third coat. And I just don't remember struggling with it the first time that I swatched it for the previous video. So you might need to be careful with your application and getting even coverage, but I thought it looked nice on my full hand swatch again for the 2 coats here in direct sunlight. I think the color is just so bright and beautiful. The coverage was pretty even as well, but I think in the future I would probably wear this in 3 coats, especially if I'm just doing like a full hand manicure. And rounding out the collection, we have Wisteria, which is described as a pastel purple Crellie. This one I almost found to be the most sheer, almost leaning even more into the jelly category, but it does build up to have that sort of milky quality once you do the second or third coat. I also thought the formula on this self-leveled really well, so maybe again I was just really struggling with the previous 2 shades, but I thought this one looked great. I think the color is super cute, just having this really nice balance of a pastel but a little bit of a vibrant lilac purple color that definitely looks even more saturated and intense when you do the third coat, or if you want the more pastel version, you can just do the 2 coats. Either way, it's a super cute color no matter how you wear it, because even on the first coat alone, I feel like it was a really nice color correcting shade, so this one definitely feels the most versatile from the collection. And here is my full hand swatch collage of the Over the Rainbow collection, worn in 2 coats in direct sunlight. No surprise, I think this is such a cute color palette. I think they all look so fun for spring. Now, getting into the jellies that I picked up, the first one I grabbed was Flushed Jelly, which is described as a medium warm toned pink jelly. I believe this came out at the beginning of the year with that one dominatrix, I think Femme Fatale collection, and as a pink lover, you just know I had to get this one. It's almost shocking to me that it took so long for Cirque to make this shade to add to their catalog, because they have so many pink jellies already, but 98% of them are cool toned. The first one they ever came out with was Guayaba, which was part of a limited edition collab, although I'm pretty sure they brought it back permanently now. And then the one after that was Lolly Jelly, which is a bit darker, as you'll see later. So this one feels like a nice in-between, and it is just so beautiful. It has the classic Cirque Jelly formula where it is just so easy to apply, super even coverage, and very glassy, where even though the color does build up nicely in 2 and 3 coats, you can still see through to your nail line. The other jelly from that same collection is called Red Hot Jelly, and this one is described as a fire engine red with warm undertones. And I would say that is super accurate. You can see it is just incredibly saturated and pigmented, even on the first coat. It has phenomenal coverage, just so even and super glassy as well. So I am still going to be showing this built up in 2 and 3 coats. I feel like this is maybe picking up a little bit more like a true red on camera, but this definitely has a very strong like orangey undertone. At least that's how I see it on my skin tone. I'm not sure exactly what my undertone is. Some people have told me I'm warm. Some people have said that I'm olive. So I'm not sure if this is a color that's supposed to like clash with my skin tone, or I don't know if this is one of those shades that it can lean more red or orange depending on your skin tone and undertone. But yeah, at least on me, I definitely see a strong orangey undertone to this red. And the last jelly that I picked up was Scarlet Jelly, which I don't remember exactly what collection this came out in, but I'm pretty sure it was sometime last year. And this one is described as a vibrant red jelly with pink undertones. So this is definitely not as warm leaning as the last shade. Don't worry, I will be showing them side by side soon enough. But yeah, I would say this had another really nice formula, although I did have some slight pooling on the very edges of my nail on that first coat as you saw. It also did look a touch more sheer compared to Red Hot Jelly, at least again on the first coat, but building it up in 2 and 3 coats, it looks like that super bright, glassy red jelly, just with a different undertone. And yeah, this one just reminded me a lot of other Cirque jellies where the color can be so saturated and intense, but there's just no coverage. It just has this very glassy, stained glass look. But as I'm sure you can see on the 2 coats here in direct sunlight, I feel like my nail line isn't as visible as it was in the 3 coats under my desk lighting, so I'm not sure how that worked out, but either way, it is a stunning color. I decided to also share these in a little collage, mainly for the 2 reds, but why not include Flushed Jelly here too? Moving on to comparisons, we're starting with Bubblegum Skies, and I wanted to quickly show this next to Pink Lady Jelly and Rosewater Jelly for reference. These are 2 of the many pink jellies that are much more cool toned. So when it came to these warmer toned pinky shades, I first pulled out Guayaba Jelly and also Peach Jelly, because I thought since it was somewhat in this lighter mid-tone shade range, it looked kind of similar, just more peachy than pink. But again, since Bubblegum Skies is technically in that milky jelly or Crellie kind of formula, it just has a little bit more coverage and maybe more of this whitened color to it as well. So you can definitely tell a difference between these 3 no matter how many coats you decide to do. For some slightly more full coverage Crellie pinks, I have Crack's Bubblegum Yum Yum on the left, and I figured I could also show this next to Polish for Days Cotton Candy, which is one of their soft focus blurring base coats on the right. Again, this is mainly for coverage comparison because both the Cracked and the Polish for Days are much more cool toned, and while I didn't get the best application on the Cracked on the first coat and it kind of came through on the second coat, I feel like it is the most similar coverage wise compared to the Cirque. The Polish for Days is just a bit more opaque. I have a couple of bottle comparisons just for color reference. Here is ILNP's Twirl and Holo Taco's Pinky Swear, both of which are creams but much more cool toned. For something warmer, I thought to pull out ILNP's Patisserie from their recent brunch collection and Blossom from their Valentine's Day collection, but as you can see, they're both really different. I guess Blossom is closer, but it's still a bit too dark. So I think the closest cream pinks that I have to Bubblegum Skies are Olive's Vernal or Amaryllis, the latter being closer because it's a warm tone pink, but it is a bit lighter. For some more jelly comparisons, I have this little sneak peek of an upcoming cracked shade called Guava Habit. This is a warm toned, sort of medium shade of pink, so it does look really similar to Bubblegum Skies, especially in the bottle, but it is more of a true jelly, so it is a little bit sheer, but also slightly off color-wise too.
I figured I could also show Bubblegum Skies next to Flushed Jelly just because they're both described as warm tone pinks, but you can see Flushed is much darker in comparison. It is the closest in color and undertone though next to Guayaba Jelly, so I used both of those as my bases and then tried to layer a white jelly on top of that to see if I can recreate Bubblegum Skies. The application isn't the best as you can see, but color wise it might work better with Flushed Jelly. Next for Coral Cloud, here it is quickly next to Jarritos Jelly, which is a very warm orange, but it is much darker in comparison and a lot warmer. So for some slightly lighter orange jellies, I have Fuyū or Sherbet Jelly on the left and Saffron Jelly on the right. Fuyū or Sherbet is definitely similar in terms of that warm undertone where it is maybe slightly more coral leaning, while Saffron Jelly almost has this yellowy tangerine kind of color. So Coral Cloud somehow looks like an in-between of these two because initially it looks like it could be closer to Saffron, but the undertone makes it look a little closer to Fuyū or Sherbet. And here I have one coat of Cracked Polishes You Want a Peach of Me, which is very similar in terms of value, but it is a bit more peachy. It doesn't really have that orangey creamsicle color, so these are very different. For color reference, I have Olive Ev's Tang on the left, which is a bit more of that tangerine orange, more yellowy leaning. So for a more creamsicle color, I have ILNP's Cream Pop, but even that one is a bit too light and yellow leaning. And for my recreation attempt, I did one coat of Gogh Away, which is a pastel yellow jelly, over 2 coats of Fuyū jelly, since it has that similar warm undertone, but it's a bit more coral leaning. So to make it a little more orangey, I thought I could balance it with yellow, and it also lightened it up. So it's not an exact match, but kind of close. Moving on to Lemon Drops, the first shades that I thought of were Gogh Away, which I had just shared. It's another pastel yellow, but that one's a bit more vibrant compared to Lemon Drops. And then I thought to pull out Organza, which looks the exact same in the bottle, and on the nail, they are also very, very similar. Organza is just more of that true sheer jelly kind of finish. So if you really like the color of Organza and always wanted it to be more opaque, like what you see in the bottle, Lemon Drops is definitely the better option because you won't need to do as many coats. I also wanted to show Lemon Drops next to Nailpollies Zest in Show, which recently came out. It's another super pastel yellow jelly, but that's even lighter. And then I realized I forgot to compare Milkglass to that nail polish shade, so I figured I could show it here. Another pastel yellow jelly I have is Dimension Nails Banana Hemp Milk, which at first I thought wasn't going to be as close as it was because it just looked a little bit brighter, especially in the bottle, but on the nail you can see that they are kind of close. I would say the main difference is that Dimension Nails is slightly more sheer, more of like a true jelly finish, but color-wise it does look to be really similar. I think maybe if I did 3 coats of the Dimension Nails, it would look much more similar to Lemon Drops. So yeah, while the Cirque is a little bit more pigmented, I think it's a good replacement for the Dimension Nails. For some more color references, I have Olive Ev's Sunshine and Holo Taco's Butter Me Up, which are just other pastel yellow creams, and both of these are even more white based. There's a certain kind of warmth to Lemon Drops, so that made me think of ILNP's Honeybee from last year's Heatwaves collection in the summer. So while that one is a fully opaque cream, color wise it is the closest to Lemon Drops, at least it's in that same shade range. Maybe ILNP is a bit darker. And for my recreation attempt, even though Organza alone was already really close, I thought maybe layering it over Citron would kind of make it a little bit more yellowy like Lemon Drops. It was kind of close, so then I added a layer of Cracked Vanille, but then that made it too light. Moving on to Honeydew, I wanted to first quickly show this next to Lime Jelly, just for color reference. They are very different shades of green. Like I mentioned before, Honeydew almost had this aqua color to it, so I thought it was kind of close to Lagoon Jelly, but you can see that one is just even more blue leaning. So for some other light green jellies, I have Sweet Mint on the left and Jade Jelly on the right. Sweet Mint is a much lighter minty shade of green, definitely very, very white based, and Jade Jelly has a similar kind of bluish undertone, but it is a little darker, slightly more grayed out compared to Honeydew, so they're not exact dupes by any means, but I feel like they're in that same color family. Since they're so similar, I figured I could use both of them to do a recreation attempt, so I did 1 coat of Sweet Mint over 2 coats of Jade Jelly, and it is kind of close. Again, Jade Jelly is just a little bit darker or more muted. So then I swapped Jade Jelly with Lagoon Jelly to get a little bit more of that blue aqua kind of undertone, but it's a little too blue. Next for Bluebird, here it is quickly next to Morning Tide, which is another milky blue jelly, but that one is much more in the cornflower, almost periwinkle leaning family as opposed to sky blue. So for some closer shades, I have Lagoon Jelly on the left and Aqua Jelly on the right. Lagoon, as I mentioned before, is a little bit more of that like aqua kind of color, while Aqua Jelly is more of that true sky blue shade. So Bluebird is closest to Aqua Jelly, being that sky blue kind of color, but it is much lighter and more white based. For some other blue jellies I pulled out Cracks Out of the Blue, which is their most recent Jelly of the Month shade, but that one, as you can see, is a little bit more cornflower leaning, so I think the closest blue that I have is Dimension Nails Blueberry Flax Milk. In the bottle, they look like they could be dupes because they have that really similar whitened sky blue kind of color, but again, on the nails, Dimension Nails is a bit more sheer because it's more of that true jelly kind of finish. It also does look a little bit lighter if you are just doing the 1 and 2 coats respectively, but doing the 3rd coat of the Dimension Nails while keeping the Cirque at 2 coats looks the most similar, I would say. So similar to the yellows, I think this Cirque would be a great alternative for the Dimension Nails. For color reference, here is Bluebird next to Holo Taco's Skipping Stones and ILNP's Oasis. Skipping Stones has a little bit more of that powdery cornflower blue color, while Oasis is much closer, but it is also much brighter and white based. And for my recreation attempt, I tried doing a coat of Cracked Vanille over 2 coats of Aqua Jelly, since that's the sky blue, just a little bit darker. But again, my application wasn't the best here. I also didn't think it turned out as light as Bluebird, so I did a 2nd coat of Vanille, which I think makes it a little bit closer color-wise, but again, it's kind of hard to tell because of the application. And then for Wisteria, I couldn't wait to see this next to Lavender Sky because it's one of my favorite jellies from Cirque. And as I'm sure you can tell in the bottle and on the nail, in the 1st coat at least, they are super hard to tell apart. I feel like they could pass for dupes, again, if you're just doing 1 coat. But once you do the 2nd coat, you do get a little bit more of that saturated kind of color coming from Wisteria, while Lavender Sky is a little bit more pastel, but they are really close color-wise. And while these are nowhere near dupes, I figured I could still show Wisteria next to Lilac Jelly and Pitaya Jelly just for color reference. For some other really light lavender kind of jellies, I pulled out Crack's Lavender Chai and Nailpollies Beautiful Just the Way You Are, both of which are extremely light and much more cool toned in comparison to Wisteria. So personally, I would say both the Cracked and Nailpollies are a little bit better as far as like a color correcting shade goes, but that could just be personal preference. I still liked how Wisteria looked in just the 1 coat. Then for Flushed Jelly, I knew I had to see this next to Guayaba Jelly and Lolly Jelly, which are the only other 2 warm-toned pink jellies from Cirque's catalog. And like I mentioned before, I feel like Flushed is a perfect kind of in-between of these 2. I think from the 1st coat alone, it looks the most similar to Guayaba, just being a bit more sheer. But once you do build up the color in the 2nd coat, it does look a little bit closer to Lolly, but that one's just a lot darker overall. So it was kind of surprising to see how close Guayaba was even on the 3 coats. I also had to show Flushed Jelly next to ILNP's Pink Slush from their watercolor collection a couple of years ago. Pink Slush is a little bit lighter, maybe not as warm in its undertone, but it is the closest, I would say maybe closer than Guayaba Jelly. I think value-wise at least, this just looks a little bit more similar to Flushed Jelly, or maybe again because it is a smidge lighter, it's kind of the in-between of Flushed and Guayaba Jelly. And for my recreation attempt, I tried doing a coat of Cracked Vanille over Lolly Jelly to sort of lighten it up. And I feel like color-wise, it's kind of there. Again, the application is not. And lastly, for reference, for Flushed Jelly, I have Mooncat's Blossoms Fire Breath and Strangeberry, which are these warm-toned pink jelly bases that obviously have iridescent flakes, but between these, I think Strangeberry is the closest. I lied, I have two more comparisons for Flushed Jelly because I figured somebody would ask about either ILNP's Malibu, Holo Taco's Glossed and Found, or even Cirque's XOXO Jelly, all of which are very true hot pink shades, so in my opinion they lean a little bit cooler toned. Maybe Holo Taco is closer, but it's still darker. Moving on to Red Hot Jelly, I wanted to quickly show this next to Lucky Jelly, which I believe is more of a neutral red or maybe just more blue toned. Either way, it's not as orangey as Red Hot and it's a bit darker too. So for some reddy orange kind of jellies, I pulled out Poppy Jelly on the left and then Cracked Tomato on the right. But as I'm sure you can tell just from the bottle shots alone, both the Cracked and Poppy Jelly are much lighter. They don't have that vibrant intensity that Red Hot Jelly has. So it's definitely most noticeable just from the first coat alone, where Cracked and Poppy Jelly almost look pastel in comparison. But doing a second coat of those two kind of looks more similar to the one coat of Red Hot Jelly. I'm not sure how exactly, people would wear their red jelly polishes, but if you do build it up again in two coats each, Red Hot does have that really intense color. And I knew this wasn't going to be a dupe, but it did still kind of remind me of Starly's Flame Jelly, mainly for that really intense color saturation. But as you can see from the first coat, Flame Jelly has a much stronger hot pink kind of undertone. It does look more red by the second coat, but next to Red Hot Jelly, it just pulls really pink. I also had to show Red Hot Jelly next to Crack's Grenadine, which is their most recent Jelly of the Month shade. This is another vibrant kind of red with a little bit of this orangey undertone, but seeing it next to Red Hot, it is not nearly as orange. It almost looks more blue toned or having like a pink undertone, but despite having the different undertones, they still look incredibly similar value-wise, so I could see people not needing both. I know I already shared Red Hot next to Scarlet Jelly in the collage, but I figured I could still show them side by side on my actual nail, just so you can really see the difference in their undertones, where again, Scarlet has more of this hot pink kind of undertone, definitely a lot cooler compared to Red Hot. And maybe Scarlet is a little darker too. So moving on to Scarlet, I thought this was going to be the closest to Lucky Jelly, again just being more in that cooler side of the family. And I had also pulled out Cracked Polish's Grenadine because seeing it in the bottle, it definitely looks a little darker and more similar to Scarlet Jelly, but again, it is slightly more of this warmer toned red, so that's why I went back to compare it to Red Hot Jelly instead. But they do look surprisingly close in two coats each. I think they're just the closest value-wise, just different undertones, and Lucky Jelly ended up being a bit darker. And lastly, for Scarlet Jelly, I had initially just pulled out Starly's Blood Belly Jelly since it looked really similar in the bottle, because since Flame is a bit more vibrant, I thought that was going to be closer to Red Hot, but again, Flame has that more pinky kind of undertone, so it ended up being closer to Scarlet after all. It's just a little bit darker, while Blood Belly is a lot darker and maybe more berry in its undertone.
So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of Cirque's Over the Rainbow collection and some of their recent red jellies. As always, I would love to know what you think of these shades. Have you already picked any of them up or not? I know with the Crellie collection, I had a couple of people asking me if I would review them. So, you know, with me having to order them, it takes a little bit longer than obviously sharing them at launch. But hopefully this video was still helpful to see how they compare to some of their existing jelly polishes, because as I'm sure you all know, they have a massive catalog, but these were surprisingly unique aside from being the Crellie finish or more of that milky jelly finish. I also know when they initially came out, a lot of people were kind of just making fun of them because they're these soft pastel shades for spring, but I really like them. I just can't help but always love a little rainbow lineup. These shades are just so up my alley, unfortunately. It is a shame that I don't have any of the Cleona jellies or Crellies that I believe came out last summer, maybe 2 summers ago, because I think there are some that are kind of similar vibes, especially the Crellie half of that collection. At least when I last checked, they were both out of stock, so hopefully they'll come back in stock sometime soon, because it would be nice to review those, see how they compare to these or just other shades in my collection. And then for the extra jellies that I grabbed, I was just really curious to see how they would compare to some other pink and red jellies. I know the majority of people do not need every single like iteration of a red jelly that comes out, but there are a lot of them and the undertones can be important, you know, depending on how you like the color or what is most flattering on you. So hopefully, again, this video was a little bit helpful in seeing the difference in undertones in these compared to the other red jellies that have come out so far. So like I mentioned in the intro, I did pick these up from Beyond Polish because I am an affiliate there. So I will have my link and discount code in the description box if you want to pick any of these up or just shop anything else from Beyond Polish. But even if you don't plan on grabbing anything, I would still love to know your thoughts down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!